On a cold night, as a light drizzle fell, the gas station lights illuminated the wet streets of Los Angeles. Keanu Reeves, known for his humility off-screen, stopped to refuel his motorcycle. Everything seemed normal until he noticed something that made him pause. A young pregnant woman, visibly exhausted, was running back and forth between carrying heavy boxes and filling car tanks. She barely had a moment to catch her breath. What Keanu did next left everyone at the station speechless and completely changed that woman's day. You won't believe the impact of his gesture. Get ready to hear a story that warms the heart and inspires hope. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another special story for you. The night in Los Angeles was calm but carried a subtle melancholy. On a quiet street, a gas station blinked its red and blue neon lights against the wet asphalt dampened by a constant drizzle. For most, it was just an ordinary place, but for Emily, that gas station meant survival. 7 months pregnant, Emily moved with determination between the pumps, wiping windshields and checking oil for hurried customers. Her thin jacket and worn work uniform offered little protection from the cold, but she couldn't afford to think about that. Tonight's paycheck was essential to cover another month's rent. Sophia, her 8-year-old daughter, sat on a plastic chair under the station's awning, sheltered from the drizzle. Her small fingers tightly gripped a worn red pencil as she carefully sketched in an old activity book. Beside her lay just 2 other equally short pencils, blue and yellow. With so little, Sophia focused intently, filling the pages with drawings that seemed deeply meaningful. As Emily worked, the low hum of a powerful engine echoed through the station. A black motorcycle rolled smoothly to one of the pumps. Keanu Reeves, dressed in a black leather jacket and helmet, dismounted with fluid movements. He removed his helmet, revealing slightly messy hair dampened by the rain. Keanu scanned the scene, taking in his surroundings. His gaze stopped on Emily for a moment. He noticed the way she efficiently cleaned a windshield, maintaining a polite smile for the customers despite her evident fatigue. His attention then shifted to Sophia, engrossed in her sketch as if she were creating something important. Curious, Keanu walked closer to the child and glanced at her drawing. It was a simple but detailed scene, a kitchen with steaming pots and pans, a table in the center, and what looked like a counter with a blank sign. Keanu leaned slightly, observing the careful strokes, noticing how Sophia seemed focused on a specific space in the drawing that remained unfinished. "Do you like to draw?" he asked gently. Sophia looked up briefly, surprised by his presence, but nodded shyly. "I draw places. Places I want to go," she replied. Keanu smiled. "In this place, what is it?" Sophia hesitated, looking back at her drawing. She squeezed the red pencil in her small hand, as if deciding what to say. Before she could answer, Emily appeared, wiping her hands on her apron. "Sophia, don't bother the gentleman," she said with a polite smile. "She's not bothering me," Keanu replied calmly. "In fact, I was learning about her drawings and the places she wants to see." Emily gave him a look that mixed curiosity and caution, but before she could say more, a car honked at the next pump. "Excuse me," she said, turning to attend to the customer. Keanu stood for a moment, watching as Emily returned to work. His eyes then returned to Sophia and her unfinished sketch. Something about this moment felt bigger than he could fully grasp. Keanu kept looking at the drawing as Sophia added a few more details. He didn't know why, but something about that simple piece of paper seemed to carry more than pencil strokes. It seemed to carry a dream. And he was about to discover what it meant. Emily wiped the last windshield of the night, but her movements had slowed considerably. The weight of her pregnancy pressed against her lower back, sending waves of pain radiating with every step. She tried to mask her discomfort, but each time she bent down or stretched to reach the center of the glass, her face betrayed her exhaustion. As the last customer finally drove away, she leaned lightly against one of the pumps, trying to ease the pressure on her back. Emily took a deep breath, closing her eyes briefly to hold back tears. It wasn't just the physical pain, it was the emotional burden, the accumulated fatigue of nights like this. From a distance, Keanu noticed, but didn't approach immediately. He watched as she adjusted her uniform and forced a smile before turning back toward the station counter. Sophia, sitting in her worn plastic chair, looked up from her sketchbook and noticed her mother's discomfort. "Are you okay, Mama?" she asked softly. "I'm fine, sweetheart," Emily replied, forcing a smile as she sat in the chair beside her daughter. Keanu, seeing the hesitation in Emily's answer, finally stepped forward. "Excuse me," he said gently, trying not to startle her. "Do you need help with something? You seem tired." Emily looked at him, surprised, but her instinct was to refuse. "Thank you, but I'm fine. Just a little back pain. It's normal for pregnancy." "Normal shouldn't mean constant," Keanu replied calmly, his voice carrying a kindness that made Emily pause. She shook her head, looking down at the ground. "There's not much to be done. It's just part of life." Keanu didn't press further but saw how she supported her lower back as she sat. He crouched slightly, keeping a respectful distance. "Do you do this every night?" he asked. Emily nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon instead of him. "2 nights a week here, and in the mornings I clean offices. It's what pays the rent and keeps Sophia in school." Keanu was silent for a moment, processing what she had just shared. "And when do you rest?" he asked softly. Emily let out a quiet laugh devoid of humor. "Rest? I don't really have time for that. Bills don't wait, and with the baby coming, I need to work even more. There's no choice." "It should not have to be this way," Keanu said, almost in a whisper. Emily looked at him directly for the first time. Her eyes were filled with exhaustion. "But it is, at least for me. I made choices that brought me here. I can't complain. Complaining doesn't help." Sophia, who had been listening quietly, placed her small hand over her mother's. "You do everything for me, Mama." Emily's expression softened, but tears welled in her eyes. "Because you're all that matters, sophomore. You're the reason I keep going." Keanu observed the exchange between mother and daughter, feeling a deep empathy for Emily. He realized that this woman wasn't just carrying the weight of her pregnancy and grueling shifts, but also the emotional burden of ensuring Sophia's safety and giving her a dignified life, even when it seemed impossible sometimes. Emily began, her voice breaking slightly. "I wonder if I'm doing enough. If one day she'll look back and think that I just fought but never really lived. That I never gave her something beautiful." Sophia squeezed her mother's hand tightly. "You give me everything, Mama." Emily smiled, but a shadow passed over her eyes. Keanu noticed she was holding back something deeper. "What about her father?" he asked gently. Emily froze for a moment before answering. "He left when he found out I was pregnant again." Keanu felt a knot tighten in his chest. "He said he didn't want another responsibility, that it was already hard enough with one child." Emily paused, her voice faltering slightly. "So he packed his things and left." Sophia looked at her mother with sad eyes. But she said nothing. Emily squeezed her daughter's hand, trying to convey comfort. "And you?" Keanu asked softly. "What did you do after that?" Emily took a deep breath, straightening her shoulders with a strength that seemed rehearsed. "I kept going because I didn't have a choice." The sound of a car horn at pump 2 interrupted their conversation. Emily straightened her posture and turned back to work. "Excuse me, sir. Duty calls." Keanu stood still, watching as she walked away. He noticed a slight limp in her right foot, the weight of her pregnancy evident in every movement. His gaze shifted back to Sophia, who returned to her chair. The girl still held the red pencil, but her eyes followed her mother with a worry that seemed far too heavy for her age. "Your mom works a lot," Keanu commented gently, crouching to be closer to Sophia's level. Sophia nodded, gripping the red pencil tightly in her small fingers. "She cries sometimes when she thinks I'm asleep." Keanu felt a pang in his chest. "Why?" he asked. Because she's tired, Sophia said hesitantly. And because, like Mama said, Papa left when he found out about the baby. Sophia added, coloring with a bit more force than before. He said he didn't want another mouth to feed. Keanu remained silent, the weight of Sophia's words echoing within him. He looked back at Emily and knew at that moment that he had to do something. The struggle this woman faced and the glimmer of hope still visible in Sophia's eyes could not be ignored. Keanu stood by Sophia, his mind racing. He didn't have all the answers yet, but one thing was certain: what he was about to do would change everything for them and leave everyone speechless. The light drizzle made the air colder and heavier. Emily adjusted her jacket over her shoulders, a shiver running through her already exhausted body. Sophia, sitting next to her, was scribbling another drawing but frequently glanced up at her mother, as if sensing the weight she carried. Keanu stood nearby, observing the quiet interaction between mother and daughter. He couldn't look away from the stark contrast, Sophia's innocent brightness and Emily's visible exhaustion, despite her efforts to hide the physical and emotional toll of her struggles. "I'd like to ask you something," Keanu said, breaking the silence with a calm tone. Emily looked at him, slightly surprised, but gestured for him to continue. "If you could have one chance, just one, to do something different, what would it be?" Emily hesitated. The question seemed simple, but the answer carried immense weight. She looked down at the wet ground, thinking for a moment. "I don't know. I don't think I can afford to think like that anymore. There's no room for what-ifs when you have bills to pay and children to raise." Keanu nodded, understanding her resistance. "I imagine you've had to give up a lot because of that." "Giving up?" "That's not the right word," she paused, searching for the right words. "It's more like life just doesn't allow certain things. You can't dream when you're barely making rent." Sophia lifted her eyes from her drawing and looked at her mother. "But you still cook, Mama, and you make the best lasagna in the world." Emily chuckled softly, a laugh tinged with sadness. "Making lasagna at home and running a restaurant are two very different things, sweetheart." "But you've wanted a restaurant, haven't you?" Keanu asked, turning his attention back to Emily. She was silent for a moment, then in a low voice, she replied, "Yes, when I was younger. Before all of this. Before Marco." Keanu caught the weight in her voice when she said the name. "Your husband?" Emily nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "When we got married, we dreamed of opening a restaurant together. Together. He used to say I had a gift, that my love for food was special. But after Sophia was born, things changed. It got harder. And when I found out I was pregnant again, he left." Sophia squeezed her mother's hand tightly, offering silent comfort. Emily swallowed hard before continuing. "He said he couldn't handle another burden, that he didn't want another responsibility, and then he just walked away." Keanu felt a knot tighten in his chest. He looked at Sophia, now drawing quietly, and then at Emily, who was doing her best to maintain a composed posture. He straightened up, looking at Emily with a serious expression. "Maybe you feel like you don't have any choices right now, but what if you had help? What if there was a way to change that?" Emily frowned, clearly skeptical. "I appreciate it, but I don't need charity. I'm fine." "I'm not talking about charity," Keanu replied, his voice firm yet gentle. "I'm talking about an opportunity. Something that could help you dream again." Emily shook her head, clearly grappling with his words. "Why do you care?" "I'm nobody important." "Because everyone deserves the chance to dream," Keanu said calmly. "And because you deserve more than just surviving." Keanu's tone grew resolute. "I'll be back tomorrow." Emily stared at him, unsure of how to respond. "Why?" "Because I think you deserve more than this," he replied, gesturing subtly towards Sophia's notebook and the station around them. "See you tomorrow." As Keanu walked away to mount his motorcycle, Emily stood still, speechless. She didn't know what to make of his promise to return, but what he would bring the next day was something she could never have imagined. The next morning, Emily finished her shift at the gas station and was organizing her things behind the counter when she heard the familiar rumble of a deep motorcycle engine. She knew it wasn't a coincidence. Sophia, who was beside her drawing, stopped and looked toward the sound with curiosity. Keanu parked his arch motorcycle at the same pump as the night before, stepping off with a calm smile, holding 2 large paper bags in his hands. He seemed relaxed yet determined, like someone who knew exactly what he was doing. "Good morning," he greeted as he approached. Emily looked at him, still a little wary. "You actually came back." "I said I would," Keanu replied simply. He placed the bags on the counter and turned to Sophia. "Good morning, Sophia." "Good morning," Sophia responded excitedly, her eyes already drawn to the bags, curious about their contents. Keanu turned to Emily, noticing her hesitation. "Before you say anything, I just want you to see what's in here." He opened the bags, revealing basic groceries, a few new clothes for Sophia, and on top, a pristine box of brand new colored pencils. Sophia gasped in delight, grabbing the box as if it were a treasure. "Pencils," she exclaimed, clutching them to her chest. "Thank you, Mr." Emily watched her daughter's reaction, but her gaze lingered on the items in the bag. She opened her mouth to speak, but Keanu interrupted her. "I know what you're thinking," he said gently, "but this isn't charity. It's just a little push to help you breathe easier." Emily shook her head, fighting back emotion. "I don't know if I can accept this." Keanu placed an envelope on the counter. "This is for rent, just for this month." He handed her a slightly crumpled flyer. Emily took it and read the words carefully. "Culinary course for single mothers." She blinked, confused. "What is this?" "It's a free cooking course," Keanu explained. "It covers professional techniques and even helps with the business side of things, in case you ever want to turn this into something bigger." Emily looked at the flyer, then back at Keanu, clearly struggling to process what was happening. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know us." Keanu offered a small smile, his expression serious yet kind. "Because you deserve it. And because sometimes one act of kindness can change everything." Emily took a deep breath, trying to keep her tears at bay. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything right now," Keanu replied. "Just think about it and know that someone believes in you." Sophia, still clutching the pencils, looked at the flyer in her mother's hand. "Mama, will you learn new recipes like the ones Grandma used to make?" Emily looked at her daughter, then back at the flyer. For a moment, something seemed to shift within her, a small space for hope, however faint. She held the flyer, glancing at Sophia, then back at Keanu. Still hesitant but with a newfound spark in her eyes, she whispered, "Maybe it's time to try." Little did she know, what Keanu planned next would be even more transformative. Months had passed since that morning. The culinary course Emily had joined didn't just refine her cooking skills, it unlocked doors she'd never imagined. With each class, she rediscovered her passion for food, and more importantly, its power to bring people together. Keanu kept his promise. During that time, he worked quietly on something bigger. While Emily learned, he gathered contacts, sought support, and found the perfect little space in the neighborhood. It was simple yet inviting, the ideal spot for what was to come. On a special morning, Emily and Sophia arrived at the location, unsure of what awaited them. Keanu stood there, wearing his familiar calm smile, waiting by the building's entrance. "What is this?" Emily asked, her eyes scanning the storefront. Keanu stepped aside, revealing a sign above the door. The elegant lettering read ** La Cha Diona. Emily froze, shock written across her face. She brought a hand to her mouth, trying to contain her emotions as tears quietly rolled down her cheeks. Sophia clung to her mother's arm, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "It's your restaurant, Mama!" Sophia exclaimed, tugging her toward the door. Emily turned to Keanu, disbelief etched into her expression. You did this?" "Why?" Keanu smiled, though his tone was serious. Because you deserve it. Your story and your talent are special, and the world needs to see them. No one should have to give up on their dreams. They entered together. The inside of the restaurant was simple but had everything Emily needed to start a functional kitchen. Neatly arranged tables and thoughtful details, reminiscent of her grandmother's restaurant in Italy. Sophia ran to a corner with a small table set up for children to draw, equipped with the pencils Keanu had given her months ago. Emily ran her fingers across the surfaces, still trying to grasp the reality of it all. She turned to Keanu, searching for the right words. I don't know how to thank you for this. You don't have to thank me, he said softly. Just do what you do best, cook, bring people together, and pass this kindness forward when you can. The grand opening happened days later, and the restaurant quickly became a cherished gathering spot in the community. Emily crafted dishes that told stories, each inspired by her grandmother's recipes, but with her own creative twist. The food was incredible, but what truly made the place special was the heart Emily poured into every detail. On the night of the opening, Sophia sat at a table, proudly handing out menus she had designed herself. Emily was in the kitchen preparing a lasagna while the restaurant buzzed with laughter and conversation. Keanu sat at a quiet table in the corner, observing it all. When Emily brought a lasagna to his table, she sat down for a moment, smiling. I never imagined I'd be here, she said, her voice filled with gratitude. Keanu glanced around. But you deserve to be. What you've created here is something everyone needs to experience. As Emily looked around the bustling restaurant, she realized her dream had come back to life. But the true transformation wasn't just in her own life. The ripple effect of that one act of kindness on her community was only beginning. The aroma of freshly prepared meals filled the air, wrapping the small restaurant in a warm embrace. Emily carefully arranged each dish with the passion and care she had always carried within her. The tables of La Ciao were occupied by smiling customers, sharing laughter and heartfelt conversations. It had become more than just a place to eat, it was a space of connection, shared stories, and community. Sophia, with her ever-present colored pencils in hand, moved between the tables, handing out menus she had drawn herself. She loved talking about the restaurant, proudly sharing that it was inspired by her grandmother's cherished recipes. Keanu sat at his usual table, quiet yet unmistakably present, watching with a satisfied smile. He knew the transformation he was witnessing ran deeper than the bustling room around him. Emily approached him with a cup of coffee. You always sit at the same table, she remarked playfully. Keanu smiled. It's the best spot in the house. I can see everything. Emily took a seat across from him, her gaze sweeping the restaurant. I never could have imagined this. Not a day goes by that I don't thank you for what you've done for me and Sophia. You changed everything. Keanu shook his head gently. You changed everything. I just gave you a little push. She smiled back, but her expression grew serious. I'll never forget what you've done for us, and I'll make sure to pay it forward. Keanu nodded. That's all I could ever ask. Kindness is a cycle. Now you have the chance to be that change for someone else. At that moment, Sophia appeared at the table, holding her sketchbook. Mama, look what I drew. Emily took the sketchbook and chuckled softly. It was a drawing of the restaurant, now complete with customers, steaming plates of food, and a large sign outside that read in bold letters La Ciao. It's perfect, Emily said, pulling Sophia into a hug. Keanu stood, leaving a few bills on the table. I think it's time for me to go. Emily looked at him, surprised. Why? You're part of this. I always will be, he replied. But this place is yours now. It's time for you to keep writing this story. He gave Sophia a warm smile before heading to the door, leaving Emily deeply moved. As Emily watched Keanu walk away, she realized her life had not just changed, it had transformed. And now, she was ready to be the catalyst for someone else's transformation. What she would do next would become the next chapter in her story, a story of courage, determination, and the profound power of kindness. The message I hope to share through this story is simple yet powerful. Never stop dreaming. Dreams are the flame that keeps hope alive within us, even in the hardest moments. They give us purpose, direction, and something to fight for. Alongside dreams, kindness becomes the thread that connects us, a quiet force that transforms lives by reminding us that no one is ever truly alone. Dreams and kindness have the power to change the world, not in grand, immediate gestures, but one life at a time, one act at a time. So believe in them, nurture them, and pass them on. Because that's how we build a more beautiful future for us all. Asterisk, if this story touched your heart, we invite you to explore more stories of hope, compassion, and resilience. Click the screen to keep the warmth alive and discover more. Asterisk.